Previously on As Trumptopia Crumbles. A former president in denial. An impeachment trial. And a country at odds with itself. Good morning, Trumptopia.
Special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Good morning, friends and interwebs family. Audience. It is Friday, February 5th, 5:22 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And in a final master stroke of 11-dimensional checkers chess, that's where you play checkers and chess in all 11 dimensions simultaneously. Trump refuses to acknowledge his status as former president, which curiously is the exact opposite stance that his new and revised legal team is taking as his defense at the impeachment trial. Apparently, it's unconstitutional to bring a trial against a former president that's no longer president, but Trump refuses to acknowledge his formality, his status as former. According to some reporting, including some documentation in which he refers to himself as the 45th president in the present tense, even though it's been weeks and weeks since Joe Biden has been installed in office by the system, which curiously turns out to be exactly what I warned and wished we would try to avoid manifesting, which was a Johnny Two Pope scenario. Here we are, half the country, or 1/3 of the country, because it isn't split up as evenly as all that. There's a bunch of people standing around going, "Told you all voting's pointless." And I may or may not be part of that group. And we may or may not be slightly smug about it. But voting may or may not actually be completely pointless. I don't think that it is, right? And the problem is there's too many problems, and there's too many theories about what all the problems are. And I like that totally hip new fractal meme brought to my attention courtesy of some Facebook group, I believe, by the name of Fractalgasm. Go check them out. And it's hilarious how many people in that group don't know what a fractal is. No offense. Sorry, not sorry. But it came up in a thread. I was like, how many of y'all don't know what a fractal is? What are you doing in this group? But there was a great meme. I don't remember how it's worded, but it's about how, like, if you don't understand fractal mathematics, and then it goes on to quote the 99 problems thing. I got 99 fractal problems, and inside each one, there's 99 more. But I digress. What a world, what a world, what a world. Astonishingly, we live in a moment in time where 1/3 of the nation is trying to cling fervently to the belief that this orange spray-tanned ticking time bomb of narcissism and cardiac issues I mean, that guy cannot be having the best of heart health. Honestly, he's going to just explode one day. And that's not a threat. I'm just worried for his health, right? Like, we must delineate. Put a pin in that because, the issue of how casually and cavalierly death threats are flung about these days is something that rightly so needs to be addressed. And I've got some thoughts on that. But hey, good morning and hello to you. What a world we live in, right? So here we are. Trump is refusing to... He's playing with some of his word magic, trying to extend, I think, for the purposes of milking the base for as much as the base will get milked. Because if there's one thing going that is hilarious and should have them outraged, is that according to some reporting, just since the election, Trump and the Save America PAC on his behalf have bilked the base for $76 million. A drop in the bucket for a guy who owes over $400 million to undisclosed foreign entities, according to other reporting. And, in a world where everyone's accusing everyone else of being fake news, who the fuck knows what's real anymore? Except for what we can observe and all agree upon in a collective consensus. And that's that Trump has normalized Trumptopian two-faced methodology. He can bold-facedly fire and or be quit on by his lawyers for insisting that the main pillar of his defense be that he didn't lose the election, which categorically is not borne out by the facts as reported, right? And just delightfully, that 1/3 of the nation that's desperately clinging to Trump and his implausible denial of what appears to have gone down, which is the other third, a slightly more popular, more populated, slightly more enthusiastic third of the nation turned out to vote for this other sock puppet. And no offense to anybody who's still fragilely attached to any of the other politicians, but ultimately, functionally, we're all puppets. And put a pin in that if that's the first time you've heard me say it. I explain it in various ways throughout the show, and I'm certainly coming back to it. And I mean it in the most sincere and organic pragmatically new age kind of way. And we'll discuss that further in just a hot second. So dumpster fire rages and continues on. Will 2021 be as tediously dumpster fiery as 2020 was? Who knows? Who else, like myself, is holding off on watching that documentary movie from the makers of Black Mirror, which is I've seen enough Black Mirror and I haven't seen it all, and I should, because I'm supposed to be a fan, but oh my god, sometimes it just cuts too deep. Some of those episodes are just, wow, mind-fucky. But they made wasn't 2020 a dumpster fire, aren't we glad it's over movie, which I'm, along with The Social Dilemma, I'm comprehensively caught up enough to be I know what they're going to say, and I'm just a little bit nervous about what I'm not expecting, or what what may catch me off guard, or just new information that'll make everything worse. But generally speaking, I'm expecting them to be yep, I'm aware of that, and yes, yeah, through both of those. And I don't know that I need that roller coaster ride, right? But, put a pin in those, because I want to hit them up once I get the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant media reviews up and running full steam. I have a lot of ambitious plans for the new year, and as you can see, I've been sort of on hiatus and taking Chinese calendar New Year's break, which is weird. I don't want to associate myself with China. I'm not a Chinese anything. China doesn't pay me to do anything. China is certainly doing weird things and being a little bit of a bully over there, but we'll talk about foreign stuffs in another segment. Today, I wanted to talk about just some of that basic things going on, and there's just so much. Literally, the hardest part of my day is staring at the blank title card of the Sprecher app platform when you're trying to like kickstart a show. When you're starting a show, I don't mean to invoke a platform name inadvertently. When you're powering up, when you're getting ready, you got to fill in the title and a little bit of a body of paragraph, body description. I stared at that all day yesterday. Couldn't do a show. Couldn't come up with I don't know it just couldn't get past that. Couldn't do it. Failed. It's terrible. And it is my aim to do a couple of segments a day. So here we go. We're strapped in. What are we talking about? What's going on? First thing, comedy moment. I was listening to a little Chuck Mangione this morning because it's been a hot minute. And if you've never, I can't claim to be a well-informed Chuck Mangione fan. Don't get me wrong. But if you're curious what flugelhorn jazz pop might sound like, and you want one tasty sound nugget to chew on for a hot minute today, go pull up on your favorite music platform, Chuck Mangione Feels So Good. A delightful treat, a blast from the past, a bit of music I personally endorse. I don't know that I listened to any other Chuck Mangione song. And for some people, this is like, you're like, yeah, whatevs, old hat. Like, everybody knows he's a great artist, brilliant, talented musician of his time, shouldn't already have been forgotten by young generations. You're welcome if you've never heard of the name. Go enjoy that bit of music and explore the rest of his catalog. Give that, I don't know if he's still around. I think he is. He seems to have albums from as recent as like 2000 and something. So, huzzah. If he's just now entering and enjoying his golden retirement years, bless your heart, man. You created something beautiful. Who would have thought the flugelhorn and post-80s jazz pop? It works. It's delightful. It's amazing. So I kicked off my day with that because I wanted to not feel, all the morbid feels that one could dreadfully wake up to on a cold February morning. Amidst this national and international dumpster fire that is the sequel to 2020. And so in trying to, the funny bit I want to share with you guys that in trying to fire that up, and I swear to you, I'm paranoid that people think that I'm getting paid to say this stuff. This is just stuff that happens in my life as I'm living it. Okay, so nobody sue me over it, and nobody judge me about it. I'm trying to listen to this Chuck Mangione track, and the craving for it hit me a few days ago, and so I just listened to it recently, so it's not like I've never searched it before. And I believe I was using the YouTube Music app this time, and of course it's ad supported because I'm not like Scrooge McDuck enough to be paying for 11 music apps. Although someday I hope to be, and have deals with them to let me play their music on my show. That'd be great. I'd love to be like some sort of delightful retro music tour guide for music you may have never heard because it's from just before your time. Because, that's what we're supposed to do with culture and stuff. But I digress. May those commercial deals land in my lap and be lucrative and awesome for future iterations of the show. Fingers crossed, manifesting dream board pinned on the wall. Okay. What was I trying to explain about? Oh, so... And I'm not even a huge fan, but, who hates the first Wayne's World? Maybe they didn't need to make a second and a third one. But there you go. But you know, if Harold, well, who was the other guys? I was just thinking about the other two dudes that made a big comeback recently. You know who I'm talking about, with the telephone booth. If they can make a comeback, then, you know, the Wayne's World dudes, huzzah. And I just thought it was cute and adorable. There they were, like, doing a commercial about something. And I think it was yes, it's coming back to me now. Because, you know, the setup for Wayne's World is that it's a local access cable show. And that's how they found their fame. And as a kid, back in the day of local cable access, I kind of fancifully dreamed of, but never did anything executable about, like, taking action on hosting a local cable access TV show. I thought it would be fun, and that I would have the kind of improv, yet classically well-educated theater mind to be able to do a semi-structured, semi-freeform variety show on cable access. It would be exhausting. That kind of thing always is way more work than one anticipates. But I digress. It was adorable, and it was hilarious, and it was cute to see them because, like, you know, where have they been? And if they had, like, their own special Netflix limited series one-season show, I would probably binge it because, you know, the world's ending. What else is there to do? And Mike Myers and what's his name are, and forgive me, I'm terrible with names. It's no disrespect to anybody. Some days I nail them, and some days I sit there, stare at the sky, and they'll never come back. And I have to ask the internet. Dana Carvey. Boom! SNL graduates, blah, blah, blah. Love them, hate them, whatever. I was pleased, as an artist that's never made it, I was pleased for them that they are still able to bring their characters in an entertaining, tidbit of, some kind of advertising that, I didn't hate watching. I didn't, like, turn away and multitask other things because it was like, oh, look at them. Cute. So, huzzah for that. I don't know why I'm rambling about it. Totally meaningless. But if you watch that commercial and you're like, what the fuck are these characters are about? There's the movies. You can find them on... I didn't look up to see what platform they're on. I'm sure you can go watch their movies. They're not the best. They're not the worst. There's worse movies out there. But I digress. On a serious note, and, what could have been its own little breaking news mini segment, but I'm not going to go through the effort of breaking it out like that. I wanted to tip a hat and send kudos and congratulations to Representative Slotkin of I think it's Ohio. Forgive me if I'm getting the state wrong. But I caught her on a segment this morning before the coffee kicked in. And oh, woe is me, what a difference the coffee makes. Even when it's hot, okay, hold on. Let me finish this and then I'll tell you about the horrible choices made that ruined my coffee life just now. Representative Slotkin was on the news. Don't remember what platform, what show. It's irrelevant. Expressing her opinion about the very touchy, very delicate, very complex, very nuanced issue of, open quote, domestic terrorism, close quote. And I say that because it must be presented with bunny ears, because running around and accusing people of that is as dangerous and as irresponsible as, accusing anybody irrationally of anything horrible, right? And it shouldn't be taken lightly. But she was bringing a thoughtful and intelligent and meaningful critique to the status that we currently find ourselves at regarding domestic protocol and policy and its limitations when compared to what is available to our law enforcement agencies regarding foreign terrorism, open quote, close quote, bunny ears in the air. We live in dangerous times, needless to say. And as some of us have been pointing out for decades now, it feels as though one of the central drives in the echo chamber of echo chambers that we call society is a poking and cattle prodding of the broadest swath of the population base towards opting in to acting out on violent action. And here we are, having the kinds of debates that we're having in a post-Trump presidency, a post-insurrection day, and I really do hope that in naming, it shall become a national holiday, shouldn't it? Everyone loves to talk about never forget, right? There was a lot of never forgetting being said day before yesterday as we memorialized one of the Capitol police officers that passed away. Rightly so. And what a sad and tragic irony. I'm sure I've critiqued it before, but it's worth saying again, how un-American, how unpatriotic was it that law enforcement officers were being beaten down by American citizens using thin blue police, the thin blue line, blue police color American flag. That patriotism has been used and manipulated and skewed to that degree that so many people labeling themselves actively as patriots, consider and imagine and think in terms of mortal violence, politically driven gun violence and just violence acts, and sort of just general brutal savagery. Even if we're not talking about, January 6th was unique, as I've expressed multiple times before. Forgive me for being redundant, but in my mind and in my heart, there's a deep level of gratitude that January 6th didn't go off in a more, shoot 'em, bang 'em up, OK Corral kind of way, because it could have. And it was on that edge of going there. But kudos to Representative Slotkin. May she drive the discussion of this issue, as she claims, in the direction of fact-based, public discourse about appropriate and not overreactionary protocol and policy. Because, dare I say, 'tis needed in the world we live in today. Because we got junior members of Congress with a really easy breezy, hyper casual relationship to death threat issuance, to not over characterize it, but not under characterize it, right? Who very complacently double speaks on the record from the floor of the people's house. I mean, her apology, quote unquote, her little speech. Tragically, I missed the whole thing live, and I'll be upfront. Full disclosure, I typically aim for being able to be like, "Yep, saw it on C-SPAN," and I did not. But I have reviewed the segments, and yes, I need to go back. Right, full acknowledgement. I need to go back and do a deep dive. But from the segments that I've seen and from the commentary that I've heard, it does not sound like she actually meaningfully apologized about anything. It does not sound like she wanted to sound like she reneged and recanted and reneged and all those words you could use, that she disavowed Q while simultaneously, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, two-facedly Trumptopian style, like, also seemed to make statements that made it sound like I'll never give up. Q. Much hay will be made of her speech. At this point, I think it's good, and although a little bit potentially dangerous, given the potential red tide at the midterm red tide and the change in the balance of power. But there we get to the heart of the issue with Team Blue. They have to really, if they're going to prove themselves to be the party of what they portray themselves to be, as opposed to, not failing to do that yet again, they really have to organize a massive grassroots movement to counter the whiplash that's coming. Because I think a whiplash is coming. All the political theater shenanigans that continue and that will only just sort of surge into the trial of the century, because this will be I don't know, as ridiculous. I think it's putting it mildly, right? I think you can agree with this. Putting it mildly, it's going to be at least as ridiculous as the first go around, right? I don't think I could be wrong about that. And now, handing it over to our favorite animatronic imaginary DJ, make a move on this groove, a house showcase groove pad digital Muzak track for your audio consumption. Thank you, DJ Zed. Thank you for being you delightful DJ robot. So, death threats. Is it too much to ask that people refrain? Is that a crazy request? One of the things that is understood and cannot be underestimated is that America prides itself in its like wild, wild westy years, and that was a nation that for a time truly like lived by the gun, died by the gun, and coulda, shoulda, woulda, mighta, and maybe in a parallel universe somewhere not too far away, could have been, is expressing itself in much more of a guntopia kind of expression, if you can imagine that. Some people not only can imagine it, they crave it. They want that. They think it's the ultimate expression of might makes right and survival of the fittest. And in a gun nut, crazy, amosexual, cuckoo nut job that shouldn't be normalized kind of way, of course one can see that one can position oneself intellectually in a theoretical sense and go, okay, yeah, I guess I can wrap my brain around understanding that, but also, what the actual fuck? Do people really want to live Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome style while simultaneously still calling themselves God-fearing Christians? Which, ironically, is simultaneously a huge hypocrisy and also really easy, right? Because it's it's one of those things that some days I think about it and I'm just profoundly shocked and outraged on Yeshua Christos' behalf, if I can dare say that. Is that too weird of a thing to say out loud? Right? Because we live in a country that talks about separation of church and state while simultaneously sort of calling itself a Christian nation. And everyone who doesn't want it to be a Christian nation will say, but this and but that and da-da, and we can rationalize that it's only their notion that this is a Christian nation. And whoever they are, when they think of themselves, they, for better or worse, it seems to appear, consider themselves the rightful center of the nation and the national identity. And in that, from my perspective, in that demographic, there's this postmodern, like, redepiction, re-imaging, and subtle transformation of Yeshua Christos from the meek, submissive, turn the other cheek, sheep, the sacrifice, the image of Christ as Redeemer through suffering, to this image of a gun-toting, Rambo-ified, and now orange spray-tanned, sort of gotta kill them all, let God decide. That gun Jesus is a thing. There's literally, and I freak out about this sometimes. Other days I'm not surprised at all, right? Other days it's like, well, duh. God is a vengeful, spiteful God that loves to send his people off to go commit genocide all the time. It's all over the Bible. And it's a horrible paradox of cray-cray that, is a big, giant, organized religious elephant in the room that is part of the overall sort of mental machinations that have allowed the narrative to get to the place where we're at. I think that is part of the story that doesn't get discussed as much, right? Like, it's easy to analyze what Trump is and is not doing, and this whole shenanigans of refusing to acknowledge the end of his administration is cute and adorable, and feeds handily right into all of the subsequent goalpost moving, can down the road kicking replacement prophecies that cropped up after the inauguration failed to go off in the Q prophesied, way that people had been expecting, which was supposed to include, a national internet and media blackout, power outage, a national mobilization of all that nonsense, right? And this mass arrest of everybody. And to compensate for that not happening, all these alternate theory statements came about, some of which, beyond absurd. We've already talked about them briefly. And all the while, what is Trump actually doing but pumping the milk pump of donations? And I don't know about anybody in the Trump cult and how allergic they are to doing the research, quote unquote. Dripping sarcasm bunny ears on that phrase. But a really simple search of what did Trump do with the donation money, or, Trump and donation money scandal, anything like that. And I often sort of, pick the worst possible search terms. But Trump donations scandal, Trump donations court rulings, Trump donations investigations will render a plethora of results that should indicate a pattern of behavior from Donald Trump and the Trump organization that should not give anybody any hope that he's ever going to do any of the things he said he was going to do with, at the time that he was taking the money. Because he never does. Never does. And that's going to be the closing chapter, right? As the remaining faithful cling to hope that Trump's weird, obsessive denial of what has happened, because the system is clear. Rigged or not rigged, the election, the swing states were counted and recounted, and a showdown between the electoral system saying we certify the count as this is, and the Trump administration pressuring the judicial branch to throw him a bone, rendered utter failure for Trump, despite the fact that Trump has spent the entire, time in office really pushing judicial installation as his prime directive. More important than any other crazy thing that happened. And by no stretch of the imagination, the point of packing all the courts at all the levels, because there was an absurdly huge, and what kind of a layup was that? What kind of gift was that from the Obama administration? Huh? And we can find rationalizations for saying that wasn't something delightfully gift wrapped, or we can get jaded as fuck about it, right? But I'll remind anybody that's new or who just hasn't caught on listening to my show, I'm a big fan of the hashtag 2 wings, 1 bird. Not to get too crazy, because I can't sit here and admonish a crazy conspiracy theorist and also turn around and two-facedly spout crazy conspiracy theory, can I? And if you're super new, I know how dangerously close to sounding like a crazy conspiracy theorist I come. I flirt really close to that edge. But I would like to suggest humbly, my friends, that if you stick with me, my story gets better. if you piece together my meta theory, if you wade through a couple of dozen episodes of this delightful show, which I bring to you raw, real, and radically unscripted, as many mornings as I can bring myself to not freak out at the blank page of it all, you'll find that I've woven together in a fun, fractally nested way a big meta theory, a cosmology, if I may, a statement of what I think, could actually be going on, that considers all the things from the most mundanely normal sounding to the most bizarrely crazy conspiracy, and goes with an Occam's razor, this is all a fractal unfolding and expressing the most probable outcomes that we sort of vote for with our mind and our perception. Insert here Muji and perception and perceiver and the objects manifested to be perceived quote. It all starts to make sense once you put all the pieces together. I dare suggest it can, could, should, would make sense. And to that end, I ask over and over again, dangerously to the point of alienating my own audience, because no one wants to hear a broken record more than twice, right? But as the public discourse evolves and deep questions are asked, I find that people are generating lists of here are the options perceived, and I mean no disrespect to anybody out there in my social media circles who's posted that sort of thing or is participating in that sort of discussion. I'm not judging so much as asking a question. As people collectively and individually consider probable outcomes and possible paths to be taken and the quote-unquote options at hand, and we generate lists because we find them interesting and tangible and meaningful. Why is it that on these lists there's one epic, massive thing in absentia, to pretend to know how to use Latin correctly, which I don't even think I did, but we'll pretend. It would be delightful. I would love to be someone who could read, write, and speak Latin. And I flirted with the notion of investing those hours of study way back in the day when I was literally in attendance at a Catholic high school. Because that was a whole episode of my life. But I digress. I didn't, but wouldn't it be cool? Because Latin, fascinating language. And the study of words, not something to be scoffed at. But I digress. Why is this one thing, to not totally flip-flop out of complete, total control of where I was going with this? There's one thing that's always missing. And I ask the world, why is this one thing always neglected, always kept off the list? And I don't think it's anything that anyone is consciously driving towards, because I think it's that deep seated. And that I would posit, I would go so far as to say that, to answer my own question, this absence, this noticeable pattern of it never turning up as a potential solution, is indicative of the problem and the level at which we confront it, and the level at which we're living through it. But healing, all caps healing, dare I say spiritual healing. May I even go so far as to complicate the label by adding a few of the words like meta and transcendental and transformational. Now, a certain number of people will just brush that right the fuck off, right off the bat, because faith healing, you don't see faith healers in hospitals solving the problems of people in the emergency room. True that. And I am not in any way, shape, or form in denial of that. for anything that is truly magical, there will be folks faking it and grifting it and pretending to be it. Case in point, I am of the strong, logical, conclusionary opinion, and I acknowledge it's an opinion, and that my logic perhaps is flawed and I can't see it. But I am of the opinion, and this might be key to comprehending my worldview, my cosmology. For those of you who are super new to the show, welcome to my mind. I can assert to you that I think it is likely to be true that humanity as a species that exists in a probability waveform function living fractal womb that's giving birth to the very experience of being alive, let alone the life forms experiencing that, that beings that express qualities that can be described as transcendental, as of like being examples of enlightenment, etc., that might literally be something that actually organically happens, that we don't need to pretend that's crazy, right? And that they teach a specific kind of spiritual healing that is the inverse opposite of the fraudulence of what you may collectively refer to with faith healing. Not to offend people who believe in faith healing, not to accuse anyone and everyone that touts faith healing, because there are crazy stories out there. And I have, my own set of crazy stories, and I'm one that is inclined towards discernment and not crazy judgment. Not to spiral too far out of control, but let us take for a moment the question of healing seriously. Why? Well, if we believe in real questioning of everything, if we're going to live in a society that is clearly riddled with psychological, intellectual manipulation, and that our best defense is to question everything, we must question things both in the negative and in the positive, right? Like, what if this were true? What would that mean? Is as valuable a line of questioning and investigation as much as, what if this were not true? What would that mean? And what should we do about it? Etc. And from my perspective, it appears that stick with me here, if there is a system of oppression that's literally spending a lot of energy and effort to manipulate the masses, and that this system can be observed if one steps far enough back from society, then with enough observation, a pattern could be said to emerge, and that's that one of the cumulative effects of the echo chamber of echo chambers, one of the cumulative directions in which we get manipulated and herded, figuratively speaking, as a species collectively, is away from deep, practical, spiritual healing. Not saying that sort of tool or practice isn't out there available to be discovered. Of course it is, right? And plenty of people find it. And plenty of people are out there faking it and peddling something that's bogus. And others are out there experiencing the real deal. And there is an important discussion, right? But bringing it back to this question, why is healing never on these lists is an option? And these lists and or these posts, based on a question asked, are always about like, what should we do next about all the problems in the world, or what would you do if you were facing this theoretical problem? And rarely have I ever, almost never have I ever seen, attending to the deeply needed spiritual healing to alleviate the centuries-old, cumulative, and ever exponentially building spiritual trauma that deeply impacts the human species at a collective level and an individual level. That shit ain't ever on the list. And it's starting to chat my hide, to borrow a line from a salsa commercial, which may or may not make any sense to folks, depending on how much you like your history of salsa and the commercials about it. But I've rambled long enough and spiraled way out there, and we'll spiral right back into some more current event discourse as we move forward. But for now, trying to stick to the 2 songs per episode protocol, here comes Party Patterns Passion, a DJ Zed uplifting D&B groove pad audio muzak track for your consumptionary enjoyment. The worst part about it, friends, sitting here trying to make ends meet, trying to hustle that digital hustle and comment on the current events of the day. It's sometimes tragic to me that, if you just step back a little bit, some weird, funny, and to plenty of people are onto this, right? So it's not like I'm breaking any news here, but I think, sadly, a lot of people aren't. But the irony of the day, to me, right now, living in this moment here, right this hot second, is that both sides of the U.S. Trumptopian ideological divide have weaponized accusing each other of conspiracy delirium, right? Now, it's easy to see that the right wing, the Republican, the grand old party, is in danger of being hijacked and becoming the great QAnon party, or the MAGA Q party, or some kind of variant of that. But curiously, and it's easy to dismiss if you're on the coalition of all those unwilling to tolerate Trump, but the right can very believably accuse the left of being wound up in their own, fugue of madness around a wild set of conspiracy theories. And looking at the two from enough distance, what's frightening is that one can, with a clear enough mind, one can position theoretically oneself on either side and go, wow, yeah, of course the other side sounds crazy when you put it together that way, and you talk about them with those constructs, and you come at them with these accusations, and you selectively utilize this evidence. Both sides can appear to be believably on the verge of tearing itself apart and wildly becoming unhinged because they're fear-mongering themselves into self-destruction vis-a-vis this insane set of conspiracy theory beliefs. And for those who are like, but what conspiracy theories do the left believe? According to the right, every word of Russiagate, every concern, every issue, any criticism of Trump, and of course, that's a madness in and of itself, because Trump is a deeply flawed individual and has been long before turning to politics, and shoulda, coulda, woulda known that about himself and avoided the whole mess by never jumping in. But that's not the universe we're in. But the right can very handily, very, very eloquently in their own parlance, in their own sort of, not to use it too judgmentally, sort of redneck level logical delusion, minimize, tear to shreds anything and everything the left does, and throw them out the window because the left dug themselves a large enough of a hole, putting all their eggs in this Russia collusion situation, which tragically and not without some irony, I don't think, and not without some cause for becoming a cynic, there's truth to, right? And that's the worst of it. But the right has quite deftly, to try to pick my words very carefully, have quite astutely written all of that off as a rage-fueled anti-Trump conspiracy theory delirium of madness. That in their world, and in the way it gets spun by their talking heads, is as crazy and as laughable as anything that the left can try to beat up the right about with QAnon. And tragically, it seems to be working, because while, blessed, thank God, people are having epiphanies and having realizations and quote, and please note, there's several asterisks around the use of the following term because I sort of deign to use it, but people are waking up, and it's that I almost hate to have to use that term, and just put a big fat red pin on the board, because I've talked about it before and I'll talk about it again in future episodes. But people truly are sort of waking up from the spell of QAnon and going, oh shit, I fell into what now? I believed how many crazy things? And walking away from it. Now, the scary thing about that is that we don't have a well thought out support system deployed as like the rest of us, the coalition of all those unwilling to tolerate Trump and Trumptopian thinking and Trumpist ideology, Trumptopian ideology, must be held up to the sunlight for what it is, which is corrosive and clearly inclined towards some sort of dystopian American family oligarchy tyranny of, the Trumps are the best and they should be, anointed as living gods on earth worthy of reigning over us like kings and queens. Because I think, it's not, although, he literally did call himself the king a few times. It is easy to say that's too far. But that is the concern. That's literally the fear that is being expressed by many. And it's difficult to talk about the left and the right because they're both so fractured. Let's put a pin in that, right? How many years have one been accusing the other of going through an internal civil war and bifurcation? Both parties are deeply fractured. Both parties are deeply at odds with themselves in multiple ways that are unique to their own history and context, but equivalent in many ways. So, don't get caught up in, trying to say that they're the same. A lot of people minimize that and then reject it, right? Like, no, both parties are not the same. I'm like, no one said that they're exactly the same. That we're saying that they're both part of a very implicit and intrinsically interconnected system, and they're both implicitly complicit in the totality of what's going on, and that shouldn't be underestimated or dismissed or trivialized. Ultimately, the left wouldn't get away with some of the quirkier things that they get away with without the help of the right, and vice versa. And both those statements are literally true. And they're currently both engaged in this ridiculous tug of war between everything else that needs to get done, which our standard pre-Trump, pre-pandemic, pre-2020 political protocol and procedure would have, been slow and belabored about. And we're coping with all that, and we're dealing with this event, which is being called a circus from people on both sides. I wrote this down a few days ago, and I think it's sort of the ominous thought that we're going to close today's episode on. And I'm glad. It was for those who haven't heard, I was deeply relieved to hear the news that the public vote, and it was really interesting and curious, they took a private vote about Representative Cheney, and counterintuitively, because it was private vote, apparently members felt emboldened to be able to vote to support her, despite the fact that there was this level of displeasure at her for her voting her conscience on the issue of impeaching Trump. That arguably, as I'm sure everybody in media are discussing in their own way, had that been a public vote, it's dicey, but odds are it might have turned out the other way around. And then conversely, they refuse to take a vote on the issue of a Representative Green that will an individual who will live in infamy, I think, in congressional like political history, as like the most recent example of ideological zealotry getting into mainstream politics. And here's my concern. Setting aside everything that could be said about the QAnon content itself, the very fact that an individual that is so openly, publicly willing to espouse that kind of thing, which is in and of itself sort of inherently problematic, even if some of their content points to some things that might be true, there's so much more that is but I said set aside that, right? It's for me, it's not so much the conspiracy theory level, like the fact that there's crazy enough stuff there that you can, in a very judgy way, reduce that sort of person to the label of conspiracy theory nut job. And I like I said, I'm about discernment, not judgment. So I'm not about name calling, right? But she is literally the living embodiment of how and why the conspiracy theory movement easily creates a bad name for itself. And there's some meaningfulness to unpack out of that beyond just like, in other words, I don't want to be accused of just calling her a conspiracy theory, not having anything to say. The fact that she qualifies, although I don't want to use that term, by all reasonable measures, she certainly qualifies. And when it comes to civic organization, as I like to point out, that's what we really need to strive for, not so much ideological, political infighting. It's the death threats, right? Like, the fact that someone is capable of espousing and casually hint, hint, nudge, nudge, pretending to disavow while also, attempting to openly signal that they sort of openly, secretly don't disavow, which is the total sum of what I got from. And I'm going to go back and watch the full thing to make sure that my vibe from the collection of clips that I saw of her speaking, either before, I think it was before this public vote that they took. So it's the death threats part. It's the fact that even if she wasn't attached to a movement that is fomenting and openly campaigning for civil war, and to some degree a level that seems to threaten a kind of ethnic cleansing, because no matter how much they deny it, there are elements of the QAnon conspiracy theory content that do most definitely espouse a sort of white supremacy, right? And this otherification of everybody else in a sort of like, it's a problem with them and they've got to get purged. This threat of violence for political gain, especially when it targets minorities, is at the individual and at the movement level categorically unacceptable, right? And if we're going to start talking about drawing lines about what is and is not tolerable, whilst we also build a coalition of inclusion and tolerance, and it's about striking that balance. And the problem I see is that these two things are very, very dangerous things, and they're separate things. The willingness to bring conspiracy theory into public discourse and public political power dealings, and the willingness to bring the threat of violence and assassination and the issuance, the casual, and I hate to get stuck on this point. It's just that it's so critically, categorically, definitively un-American, unpatriotic, undemocratic. And no matter what other critical flaws and reasonable critique could have been brought moments before to this nation and this experiment, we have to stop and go, whoa, 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 everybody calm the fuck down. Because we cannot allow those floodgates to burst open. I had very pessimistically written that perhaps the floodgates have, past tense, burst wide open on that problem. But we cannot normalize at the political level, at a societal level, at an interpersonal level, at a public discourse level. We cannot allow, right? We're talking about boundaries, and in a culture of tolerance and inclusion, how do you delineate that which is no longer, what is beyond the pale, what is intolerable? The casual issuance of death threats, especially for political gain, it cannot be. That aggression cannot stand, to quote the dude. Truly, I should do that more often, as I am an ordained minister in the true and very, very actual, factually existing, and that's the best I can say about it, organized religion, about, established and founded on the notions that there's some spiritual insight to be gained from the film The Big Lebowski. And to me, that's a big haha and sort of lampooning, joke in the eyeball of organized religion. But I digress. As I was ruminating in a prior episode not too long ago, January 6th can, and it would be very dangerous if it did, can become some sort of mythological event of great pride, akin to the enduring legacy of self-manipulative nonsense that, there's an ongoing claim that the South did not lose the Civil War, that lives, right, as cultural meme. That kind of stuff, this building of fantasy to that degree. And we can get lost in the argument of what is Matrix and what is not. Like, what really happened, what didn't. And I think that exploiting that very awareness, exploiting that very issue is a whole part of the next level development of, how complicated and how problematic it is to build public consensus through public discourse to achieve gains in civic organization. But as I have often said in Ruminated Friends, there's always too much to talk about and not enough time to talk about it in. My humble and sincere thanks to you, dear friends, for tuning in once again and sharing your time and mental headspace with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. That has been me, and that has been you listening to me ramble about those things and that stuff. Time is money, friends. If you live in the United States and you are a voter and you voted and or didn't vote, but you can, could, would, should vote in the next election, which I know, what the fuck, way too soon. Why are we talking about it already? Tragically, that's how it works. Either we take civic duty seriously or we chuck it out the window and prepare for dinosaurs and zombies, because WTF, folks. I am a proponent. The argument is, that, as I was discussing about lists and, the options, I am a proponent for the everlasting missing option of screw all the other options, heal the people in the system therefore healing the system from within. As we build the better mousetrap, which will take forever, it always takes longer than you want, to change a system that disrupts older systems, and especially if you want that new system to be better. But the wisdom prevails despite that inconvenience. Who was it? Not W.C. Fields. What a ridiculous suggestion. Sorry, y'all probably didn't hear that happen, but that was the first name that came to mind. Not Bucky from Civil War. Buckminster Fuller. Buckminster Fuller, I do believe it was the American genius who said something about don't fight the thing, build a new thing. Terrible. That was terrible. In a sci-fi futuristic version of my podcast show, I would have, robot AI sentient co-hosts that would, at the drop of a hat, be able to pull the quote and chime in with it. And this is me feeling as my brain tries to pull the thing. But essentially, he encouraged us to consider that fighting the system is not the solution to the system's problems. Because as either he and or someone else very much like him pointed out previously, you can't fix the problem with the same tools you use to build the problem. It just doesn't work, right? The darkness will never solve, violence begets violence. It doesn't solve anything. But back to Buckminster Fuller, he said, just build a better system. And many ask now, how can we build a better system while this dumpster fire is going on? Well, I humbly propose to you that inherent in that building a better system is healing the system as it exists now so that it is less of a raging dumpster fire and gives us room and support to build the better system. Crazy out there from not left field, not right field, but the middle way. My humblest thanks. Thank you for tuning in. That has been today's show, and this will be our exit music. Endless Escapades, Tropical House 101 remix from the old remix pad days before they wrecked that app and it stopped working. Someday I hope they'll fix it and I can use it again. But here it goes. Thank you, DJ Zed. This too shall pass. Whatever's going on, friends, it is always challenging to remember and stay connected to without it letting get too overwhelming. But we strive towards that integration, right? An awareness that people are suffering. People are suffering, and that does not to invalidate one's own suffering. Everyone's suffering is valid, and that's a tricky proposition. Because that means everyone has to acknowledge their own suffering, but also look beyond it. And that's, I think, one of the things that is being painfully brought into focus due to the confluence of all of the world's recent events and all of the things that are weighing, heavy on people's minds. So as you move forward through your day, always gratitude for choosing this little show to be part of that journey. And I hope that by tuning in and checking out how I see the world and some of my crazy thoughts about it, that it brings a little bit of hope and perspective to your own world. And that some of that perspective is inclusive, always, no matter what else I'm rambling about on the show. A deep and genuine empathic acknowledgement that the world at all of us, the whole of humanity, everyone is suffering. And that we have that in common. And that while we may blame society, we are society. And we are intrinsically interconnected to one another. And that's a double-edged sword and a deep and complex, nuanced topic not to be unleashed on this particular segment or today's episode at the very tail end. But something worth contemplating, so I leave you with that. Don't let it get you too depressed or too topsy-turvy. But find some comfort in that no matter where you are on the scale of the world's suffering, you are not alone, and everyone else is also not alone, right? In that. And while that could be really morbid, there's also some profound healing to be found there, which is wordless and impossible to describe beyond pointing to it. So go boldly there into one's own mind behind the conscious meta structure of our identity and look there to that sensitive hollow spot, that distinctly unique and yet universal frame of reference, which is that which anyone can understand intuitively, the seat or center of that which is you, the I am point, the point at which you find yourself. When you point to, this is where I am. It's there that we find the healing and the power that is sought, right? That we talk about when we talk about healing, spiritual healing. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart, and may you find that center and integrate the light and the dark and find a bit of peace and healing, and then share that with all those around you, because I think that's the jam, folks. That's where we're at in terms of what the universe is asking us to consider doing in response to the dumpster fire that is the world around us. Peace out, folks. Thanks for listening.
And that is what I've got to say about that.
As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.